Mwai Kibaki and William Ruto are some of the most schooled presidents we've had so far. Out of the 5. Kenya has not had so many heads of statement, unless you are to count Ochuka, who was in control for about 5 hours. So we've only had 5. So out of those 5, we only have got very few people you can actually liken to each other. And it's also good when a president actually looks, an African president for that, looks at another president as a role model, actually one in the same country. Because normally in this country, everybody comes up and even in the private sector, the management I took over wasn't, there was no one else. I am the Messiah. At least he says he is not an exception, and that there is somebody else who went ahead of him, and that is good leadership in and of itself. And
I'll still come back to you because you didn't. I didn't let you get to the what about the Ishuga letter was over the top, but I'll come back to you later on that. Ishmael, what do you make of first of all the timing of this Mount Kenya tour immediately after they agreed to talks? You know, was it to assuage any fears that this could lead to a shift in the power dynamic? And number 2, the repeated comparisons between his approach and that of Mwai Kibaki at a time Kenyans are grumbling over the cost of living.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Olive. Looking at the way people react, you see, citizens normally are the people who give reviews on what is going on in the political platform. Looking at how Kenyans are commenting and looking at how Kenyans feel and assessing on what we see on media, it is possible that the person dropping names could be wanting to support the aspect of dropping the name vis-a-vis what is the reality at the ground. And this is a psychological game, mind game. Ordinarily, if I come here and then I start mentioning names of colleagues or big persons in society, it could be that I really want to be assisted in my own position. But having said that, I think that Kibaki did his homework well. I think that in Kibaki's time, we felt there was money around in the pockets. And when you say economy has stabilized, that could be true in terms of how you relate with development partners and IMF and all that. But then, so my mother and grandmother who are planting beans next week, do they honestly have the fertilizer being talked about so that they are able to do their farming, so that it is 2,000, 2,500 and not 5,000, you know, against what has been said? When the Speaker of the National Assembly says that we have brought down fertilizer from 6,700 to 2,500, and how better can it be asked? And then the President himself says we are now bringing the fertilizer from 3,000 to 2,500. So there is need to put all these truth check to confirm exactly what's going on. Is the economy growing? Has it improved? Okay, he says it has stabilized. Yes. And I think we've got to cut a slack, you know, cut him a slack.
Because he pointed out that inflation has gone down. He talked about the cost of gas has gone down.
Yes. Some of these have actually gone down. But I think that, like they always say, they need more time for us to assess them. We need to take a bit of time. But in terms of, is it real or it is political mind game? This is the most important thing. When you hear every single public utterances, Raila is hitting back, the president is hitting back. I think that's where the confusion is. And I think we should move beyond this and in practical terms show that it is true, the economy has improved, has stabilized, we are now on our way, so that we don't have this enmity and tension being created, yet we have a meeting in a day's time on Wednesday.
All right. Javas, your thoughts before we take a break. Whose spirit are you invoking this morning?
Well, I fear that I'm not in the business of invoking spirits, lest I'm possessed. But, Olive, I think beyond the kind of concise intelligence that the president receives every morning, I think that one thing that is interestingly curious is his visits to various parts or regions of the country and spending more than a day or two there. I think that it's important, possibly for him as head of state and government, to feel the pulse of the nation properly by spending so much time there. He came from the coast where he spent a couple of days, and just recently, of course, from here in Thika, he went and took a good drink from the Chania and moved all the way, and we've had him speak from atop the mountain. And from his view, I think he stood upon the Everest of thought and looked at and took a panoramic view of the history of presidents in this country and said that he could think and equate himself to former President Mwai Kibaki in terms of his approach to economic management. True, as my friend Ishmael says, the economy, yes, is improving, and the economy's improvement is a function of policies being in place and being implemented. And that tells me that maybe even before we swallow saliva, we would see much more improvement and things being dealt with beyond those that have been slated for discussion by the team of 10 aside. But all these things that are happening possibly take me to the quite concise, pithy essay by Chinua Achebe in his 1983 book, Trouble with Nigeria, and tells you that some of the things that Nigeria was facing at the time mirror our own today. The issue of mediocrity in our politics, arrogance, lack of patriotism, and national purpose. When you look at the manner and the character of some of our politicians, you realize that there is a very serious lack of patriotism, consciousness, and nationalistic purpose in manner in which we should frame our issues for purposes of taking the nation forward. When I hear some politicians say that we can make this country ungovernable, then I realize the extent of vacuity and emptiness of leadership in matters governance in this country, that I hold my cheek in pity and reflection and ask myself, why are we not this blessed by great leaders? In fact, I would say that I would agree with Kwei Ama of Ghana, who said that the beautiful ones are not yet born. I think in matters politics, beautiful ones possibly are yet to be born.
All right, so you were getting a little bit, I was trying to tell you, you're getting a little bit ahead of me there, but it's fine, it's okay. We take a break now that Javas has firmly planted his feet on the issue of, which we're discussing this morning, and here it is. We are asking, speaking of self-interest and whether our political class can put that aside in the interest of Kenyans is what we come back with. And maybe during the break, Javas, you can tell me, do you share a tailor with the president? I am seeing similarity in the kaunda on the other side of this break.
Pesa ambazo zinakuja kwa counties hazitoshi. Mambo ya afya, mambo ya maji, mambo ya library, mambo ya mabarabara ndogo ndogo, mambo ya kilimo. Haya yote ni kazi ya counties. Na pia hata serikali kuu yenyewe imesema kwamba tuko na bottom up economic model. Bottom up ni wapi? Si ni kwa magatuzi.
Kweli maandamano haya yamekuwa katika kaunti mbalimbali. Sijui kama hapa Baringo kumekuwa na maandamano ya kupinga hali ya uchumi na gharama ya juu ya maisha.
Hapa ni Kenya Kwanza bwana. Kenya Kwanza haiwezi pinga serikali yake.
Lakini wanasema pia uchumi umepanda kila kaunti. Hapa haujapanda.
Uchumi umepanda kila mahali.
Wanasema kuna harufu hivi ya handshake kati ya Rais William Ruto na Raila Odinga. Handshake ikiwa uko sawa ama pia wewe utaingiwa na tumbo joto gavana?
Tumbo joto na nini? Kwanza mimi niko na kaunti yangu naongoza hapa hivi.
Nyanjani hadi hewani ili ujue kunani. Kila Alhamisi jioni tukutane stesheni.
Mimi ni Nuru Abdulaziz na hii ni NTV.
A dominant team's pursuit of excellence and success never stops, as Manchester City has proven in recent years. The drive for success has been relentless. Manager Pep Guardiola always demanding more and better. So it is, with a new season about to kick off, that Manchester City resumes its relentless pursuit of excellence and success.
Gadhe na kuhanya. Nilimwona na malaika.
Gadhe, unajua na miss ni ule msimbaya.
Umemjua Makarios for how long?
Mimi simjui afisa.
Last chance kijana. Who runs this drug business? Na nitamgetaje?
Centum Real Estate offers you an opportunity to own a home at the Two Rivers Development, Mzizi Court Residence. Talk to us today on 0703 262626 or text 2 Rivers to 22365.
All right, we are getting, the Daily Nation is getting fact-checked by Arnold Maliba, and he says, according to his understanding of the data released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, latest data, the Kenyan, let me see, this 77% figure here on the front page is erroneous. It states over the 4 years to 2022, the KNBS data also shows that the youth population, which is 77%, bears the heaviest brunt of the population that remains unemployed for more than a year. Okay, I'll seek to get clarity on that, Arnold, on what they based that figure on. Yeah. Okay, so we looked at how Kalonzo Musyoka extended an invitation in his letter. Yeah. James, this is Kimani Ichung'wah's letter, and a lot of people took note of this paragraph here. Your Excellency, sir, it is our considered view that these are venues, oh, sorry, I should start with the previous paragraph, which states that considering that the Kenya Kwanza administration is on record committing to the Kenyan people to check on excessive borrowing that has previously led to reckless accumulation of public debt, cognizant of the prevailing economic conditions and the need for austerity measures, both at individual and collective level, with the view of mitigating the high cost of living, we respectfully, I beg your pardon, request your team to allow the two teams to schedule a meeting at public venues such as County Hall, which I would be happy to engage the Parliamentary Service Commission to make available, or in the alternative of the Kenya at the School of Government, Kabete. He didn't leave it there. He went on to state, Your Excellency, sir, it is our considered view that these are venues that will not occasion any additional expenditure to the public and which would otherwise be available for such public meetings at little or no cost to us or to the Kenyan taxpayers, as opposed to their, and I quote, luxurious 5-star Serena Hotel, Nairobi. In any case, we are only in caps discussing matters that concern the people of Kenya. We believe such matters should be in open public statements. And when I read this, I was like, okay, if it's in the interest of austerity, then are we holding all government conferences now at the Kenya School of Government or at County Hall? Your thoughts?
My thoughts, right?
Yes.
I think...
On the tone, and we're still in line.
We are still at the preliminaries.
Yeah.
I have had the occasion of listening to some sentiments about some of this discussion. And I want to tell you that I think, at least with respect to that question of starting off the conversation, I find our friend Kimani Ichung'wah just a bit juvenile. I think someone has to start a conversation. As an advocate who writes letters daily, even in very contentious questions, someone has to start the conversation. There is a mediator in between. The conversation has to start in some meeting. Someone has to write a first letter. So you cannot be responding to just about every instinct you have with respect to the other side's letter and put it in those kind of things and so on and so forth. Well, I do not know how the talks are going to pan out eventually. I have participated in some of these talks before, and there would be a good point to make if they want to incorporate County Hall as one of the places where this conversation is going to be held, depending on what stage they are in that conversation, okay? if they are at that stage, for instance, if they choose, for instance, to take views from the public, probably County Hall would be a good place for them to hear some of these people who might present memoranda and make some presentations before them. If they are having a very serious private conversation now about very weighty issues, probably that might not be the best place. They might have to look for that luxurious Serena Hotel or whichever other hotel and sit there and have this conversation. Anyway, I know what our friend Kimani Ichung'wah is trying. He's trying to look like Kenya Kwanza is concerned about austerity because we are talking about cost of living and so on and so forth. But I think that is just too it's just too cheap for Kenyans because they will see through it. So in my view, one thing I know, Olive, is that the agenda for this conversation has already been predetermined. The two principals already understand what they want to discuss about.
Yes.
But I'm sure the people around them are going to muddy the waters as much as possible. Because, of course, there are a lot of undercurrents going on about what probably the eventual outcome of these talks is going to be. And some of these people, the left and some on both sides, of definitely not probably very sure about what the eventual result is going to be. But I know, as in the past, this discussion is already done. All this process is just going to lead to that result. And probably everybody is just trying to square things out and imagine how they're going to fit in that eventual discussion. So I think everybody needs to calm down, including Kimani Ichung'wah. The other side needs to calm down. If they have agreed to get to the table, let them go there like adults of competent understanding and have an adults discussion about how to sort out some of these things. When that happens, you will start seeing people engaging in a little bit more serious conversation that concerns Kenyans. Of course, Kenyans have a lot to talk about. We are happy for government to be talking to the opposition, and we welcome that kind of development. But let people not waste our time with all these stories about where to meet. Even if they went and met in Uganda, for as long as they have that conversation, we actually do not care. The biggest problem to this country is not the amount of money we are going to spend in these discussions.
All right.
Okay? We have a lot of other problems with the budget, the holistic budget of government. We have very many issues with how government conducts itself, how the opposition conducts itself. This venue, whether it's going to be Windsor Hotel or it's going to be Serena or County Hall, is definitely not an issue.
Okay. Wacha niwashe moto sasa. Anyway, but when you were speaking, I remember this article I read yesterday in the Sunday Nation, hidden agenda in Ruto Raila ceasefire for politicians. The fight is about individual and selfish gains, not the common good. They are saying this is a scramble for relevance. This particular report penned by Moses Nyamori and Samuel Owino, they say key players in both camps trying to halt the talks over fears that they could lose big if the principals seal a political deal. The choice of hardliners like Kimani Ichung'wah and Aaron Cheriot is an indication that Ruto is not committed to these talks. And this is a quote of John Buddy, nominated member of parliament. On to you, Arnold. First of all, you can respond to this, right? But also, there's a question I left pending on what about Kimani Ichung'wah's letter was over the top, in your view?
Well, when I spoke about Kimani Ichung'wah's letter being over the top, I thought that he was killing a mosquito with a hammer. I know that Kalonzo's letter most likely was written by Sifuna, because that is not Kalonzo's letter and tone. If you've known Kalonzo being very diplomatic, respected across the world, he is one of those very sober minds. But when you looked at the letter written in the name of Kalonzo Musyoka, sounded so much like Edwin Sifuna, cocky, with a lot of preconditions, already setting up everything else, including knowing too well how tensile the situation is.
But what do you say about what James is saying? James is saying somebody has to extend the first invite.
I actually wanted to even ask him a question when he speaks about that it will end up to that outcome or that result. Probably he already knows that. He just stopped short of qualifying what that result is when he spoke of it. But let me just execute this and finish it. That we all know former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, his credentials, even him as a person. He's not one person given to brinkmanship. He's quite very diplomatic. So that letter was a little bit, as much as it was couched in what looked like was diplomatic words, you can see the cockiness, including setting up the venue, setting up the, not the venue, as in setting up the debt, knowing too well that on the other side, looking at the situation, you know, politics is quite contextual. You cannot run out from that. So he would actually have appreciated and floated at least options.
Class. Sorry, too.
Can I finish and then go back to?
But do you agree that of the lot, Kalonzo is probably the most experienced in this area? Why would he then not take the lead?
That is why I said I do not have a problem with him taking lead. But remember, they already had set up time frame. And Mambole will tell you, Mambole and I have actually served in some other spaces where such stuff are worked on. And I will tell you that you cannot go ahead and predetermine. I cannot, you cannot go to a place and then set a time frame. Because that in and of itself is issues that you actually have to deal with. So when you come out and say that we are looking forward to finishing this thing in 30 days, already on the other side, they feel like you are rushing us. And in negotiations, if somebody is rushing you, he definitely has got an outcome that you do not know about, and you have to be worried about it. Then, of course, when Kimani Ichung'wah responds, I said it was a little bit over the top because I thought that little bit of cockiness, he should actually have responded to it quite in a balanced manner. Even though the letter is cocky, he comes out quite, of course, number one, to demonstrate that Kalonzo Musyoka, or whoever wrote Kalonzo Musyoka's letter, has no monopoly.
Do you have evidence that
has no monopoly? Well,
did not write that letter?
He's not a very senior man. Somebody else has to do it, and then, of course, he reads and then affirms. So he probably just appended the signature after reading it. But the thing is that Kimani Ichung'wah goes ahead just to demonstrate that whoever wrote that letter, whether it's Kalonzo Musyoka or any other person, does not have a monopoly on being silly or cheeky. So, but then he little bit, in my opinion, kills a mosquito with a hammer. It was a small thing he should have swatted without necessarily going that far. But be that as it is, I think we are getting lost here. You know that I'm one of those people who still hold to the opinion that we do not need dialogue or mediation in the first place. Let's go back. First of all, we are mixing up here things. We have been talking about a national dialogue. Now we are talking about mediation.
Yes.
From a governance perspective, all those terms are different.
Yes.
So are we talking about a national dialogue?
Agreed.
Are we talking about a mediation?
Yes.
So when we're talking about mediating, what are we mediating against? Now, everyone else is throwing around salvo, saying that Obasanjo did not want to be, his intervention at that particular point needed to be, he wanted it to be kept under wraps.
Yes.
Somebody else went ahead of it, and then the other one accused that you brought in Samia, and then you did not follow through with what they had agreed. So there's too much games going around. But be that as it may, let's say this. There are four things that, whether that outcome that Mwalimu Mamboleo speaks of, that outcome, if it's there or not, there are four issues that we really need to think about. The first person to ever have a handshake of sorts was late Moi.
Okay, can you hold that thought so that I can have Ishmael come in just to weigh in on this particular issue, this muddying of waters. Before we get into the Obasanjo thing and the difference between actually a national dialogue and mediation, and is this what was envisaged? Ishmael, your thoughts on this particular report, hidden agenda in Ruto-Raila ceasefire. Do you agree that key players in both camps are trying to halt the talks over fears that they could lose big if the principals seal a political deal?
I ascribe to the view that Kenya is not alone. It's not an island in itself. We belong to a community of nations. We belong to a League of Nations. We belong to, you know, we are member states, the UN, and there are rules and structures that also affect us as a country as long as we have signed that we belong to this kind of grouping. So when a colleague says that some of these discussions are predetermined, for example, the international community and friends of Kenya have told Kenya very clearly, we do not want any war in Kenya. We do not want the skirmishes we are seeing in Kenya. And it does not have to take the global, you know, partners to say that. But we failed on our own. And so when we extended, you know, a request to former president for Nigeria, or global partners requested him to come in, it is quite normal, and it should not be interpreted to be interference, or why are we, or what are we mediating, or what kind of dialogue are we looking for? And we should also always, as we speak, Olive, we should move beyond stage A once we have already dealt with it. We are not discussing whether there will be mediation or dialogue. We have crossed that bridge. It will be. Now it is going to happen starting Wednesday. Now the problem is, are people honest and sincere?
Well, what is this it? I think that I mean, when you tell us that this is a I was trying to pull up a piece by Karuti Kanyinga on the same issue, the hidden agenda. And yes. Can we address hidden agenda, then we come into the whole national dialogue?
No, in my honest view, Olive, there is no hidden agenda. There is hidden agenda on the part of the hardliners, both Raila's men and William Ruto's men. But in terms of what they are going to discuss, the points have been put out there. In fact, the differences of opinion in terms of what was agreed in a closed-door meeting between the president and Raila Odinga and Obasanjo. Maybe that is what could be. Is there something we don't know? But they have all put out what we need to discuss. And as far as I'm concerned, by the way, Raila Odinga should audit the UDA manifesto as it is. Because now it is William Ruto in State House. We should hold them to account in terms of the IEBC servers. You talk about auditing IEBC and the 2022 elections, and I said it earlier again. In the United States, for example, what is wrong with auditing? I mean, there has been claims by Kenya Kwanza that indeed Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta were trying to subvert the will of the people of Kenya. So what is the problem if that is audited? So that we can know, yes, is it true that Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta tried actually to subvert the will of the people? So in my view, those issues, they are not any mysterious. It is Raila wants the 2022 general elections to be audited. Kenya Kwanza does not imagine that. I mean, why? We are beyond elections. And then somebody is saying, okay, apart from that, we want to discuss violence during picketing. And I think that's a very noble point. What is the issue? We want to discuss who brings violence during picketing. Let that be among the issues. Now, we are arguing whether there should be a cost of living and all these kind of things. I don't think there's anything mysterious. The mystery here is Kimani Ichung'wah being a hardliner, and probably you talk about Opiyo Wandayi also being a hardliner from this side. So it is those hardliners who are making it look like there's anything mischievous. There is nothing. People should agree, even if they do it openly. We have been through the Supreme Court hearings. We see it live on television. There is no secret. But the problem, well, what James said actually is also true, that the friends of Kenya have told the president and Raila Odinga that there cannot be violence. Now, the narrative, who begins the violence, who is responsible for what and what, that can be discussed openly. There is no issue about it.
Javas, is, you know, the squabbling over the agenda, over when to start, over where to hold the talks, do you view it as a deliberate attempt to scuttle these talks?
Olive, I sit here this morning gripped by asymptotic sadness.
Which sadness is that?
And
it's asymptotic.
Exactly. You see,
sorry, I'm not familiar with the word. What does it mean?
You see, Olive.
It's actually fake. It means he has no problem.
I find it quite atavistic and appalling in terms of the self-interests or selfishness on the part of our political class. So much so that they are all the time leading us into some kind of hostage politics, hostage-holding politics. And that's where we find ourselves nearly after every election. And it is so sad that we, the people, entertain this every now and then. As we sit here this morning, I am bewildered and so saddened by the place of Kenya's intelligentsia in our politics. I ask myself this question, for instance. How come and why are Kenya's intelligentsia so quiet, so unheard, so unmoved by the status of our politics today? Now, of course, as a matter of fact, Kenya's intelligentsia has been auctioned in tribal and political market.
So when you say intelligentsia, who do you mean? Who are you referencing?
No, I mean, I'm talking about the elite. I'm talking about the dons. I'm talking about the policy wonks. I'm talking about, you know, the sound boards, the people, the young people, the educated, the exposed, that should be the sound boards for our leadership and governance. Now, today, even our dons from our universities cannot be listened to by our political class for the same reason that they've been auctioned on the political market. Now, today, before we even talk about, or as we talk about the issue of the talks that are supposed to be held, whether we want to call it convention or mediation, before we agree actually what it is that we want, because we as a nation seem not to know what we want, what have we learned, or have we sought out to get even some direction and advisory from Kipra, for instance, on the policy situation, on the cost of living? Because Kipra is the policy engine for this country. We have got, for example, at the Institute of Economic Affairs, are we going to have them backstop these negotiations? We are not going to have any helpful discussion and way forward when we get to have a meeting of politicians speaking to themselves, and here driven by woolly, selfish interests. In fact, let me tell you, what is leading us into this kind of impasse is what I consider pious, materialistic wooliness by the political class. And until the time when we are led by pious objectivity on the part of our politicians, where bourgeois interests does not constitute the core of what drives or stagnates this country, then let me tell you as a matter of fact, whether we have Kalonzo Musyoka or even the Pope as the lead delegation of the delegation of Azimio, it will not amount to so much. Because now, Olive, just the same way Pablo Picasso painted pictures and Beethoven composed music, why can't we then say that given the oath of office that William Ruto, the president, was given by the people, and it was in broad daylight, he himself has said that he's leading and wants to lead like Mwai Kibaki, that when Jomo Kenyatta had his time, when Daniel Moi had his time, and Mwai Kibaki had his time, and even Uhuru Kenyatta, so should William Ruto. But the problem here, as a matter of fact, is political by nature. For these reasons, that, of course, we know, subject to history.
Okay, I don't want you to move too much along, because there's something I wanted to pick up from what you just talked about. You talked about pious, materialistic wooliness.
Yes.
There's a political scientist, University of Nairobi, Karuti Kanyinga. He penned this on this week's weekly review. And habari ndio hii, it will be a pullout now in your Sunday Nation. So when you purchase your hard copy, you can find it, but it is also available more interactively on the epaper.nation.africa. So he said this. He said there is no crisis. It is just a turning point. And so something you said resonated with something I read here. And he said, yes, here we go. The present challenges, simply put, center on grievances of exclusion of political elites from power, rather than institutional failure and capture and manipulation of institutions by powerful ethnic elites. Let me just take that again. The protests are not the result of a political crisis similar to the intense difficulties that the country experienced in the early 2008. The present challenges, simply put, center on grievances of exclusion of political elites from power rather than institutional failure and capture and manipulation of institutions by powerful ethnic elites. He went on to say here that these anti-government protests are just an expression of grievances that are common among elites immediately after election. Those who win get everything and losers lose everything. This is the basis of antagonism. And so he says this is a turning point for Kenya, because he says if the talks end up with government addressing the cost of living and reconstitution of the Electoral Commission and nothing for the opposition political elites as individuals, then practice of politics in Kenya will change. It will be clear that post-election protests and talks cannot deliver to individual political elites. There is a better country if the focus is on strengthening institutions and respect for the Constitution. But our political elites cannot stay in the wild for long, even though this is what is required to break with the past. How the talks will be concluded matters. They present a turning point in our politics. But will this happen, or the elites will continue to get something for themselves only? James.
And that's where I come in. I'm a very practical human being. And it doesn't matter how much we philosophize on this talk or in any other talks across the many media houses in this country, in social media or elsewhere. I have told you, Olive, that this is a purely political discussion. It's a pure political discussion between Raila Odinga's side and William Ruto's side. Now, in politics, no meeting happens unless the discussion has already been held. Because politicians consider any such kind of discussion an unruly horse, which they do not want to mount because they don't know where it will take them. The only reason anyone would mount a horse like the bipartisan talks you're seeing is because they can predetermine to a very large degree what the outcome of that is going to be. And in my view, that is totally scientific. When you begin writing a thesis, of course you do hypothesis, you do a literature review, and then you project what the result is going to be. The entire process in between is just a way of getting there. That's what happens. That's why, even in scientific inquiry, the writing is done before the writing begins. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you, Olive. This is about exactly what you've just said, that in 2022, August, we went into a general election. In that general election, there was a presidential election, and the two sides won against the other very marginally, and each side thinks that it won. You know, isn't that the case? Each side actually thinks they won. Each side thinks it is backed by sufficient Kenyans, irrespective of the formalistic process of swearing in and taking power and so on and so forth. And this has not happened for the first time. It is happening for the umpteenth time. That's why I would want my colleagues here to understand that Kenya is stuck there. Of course, it is good for us to imagine a world in which the great big ideal of how good democratic politics should be done, and so on and so forth. But this is Kenya. Now, Kenya doesn't have a social problem. Out here, people don't have a social problem. People don't have a problem with each other. We might be divided along tribal lines and so on and so forth, but by and large, we actually survive together in many places. Nobody's fighting each other on anything. There could be a little crime here and there, but it is not majorly on a social fabric-driven crime scenario. Now, out here we have a political problem that until my person is in State House, I am not in government. And being in government is a big deal. So what do I come back to? That you will see, for instance, on the Star, that each of these sides of government, that is at page 5, each of these sides of government, and you know, people don't know that even the opposition is actually government. Each of these sides of government has an agenda they want from these talks, okay? For instance, the Kenya Kwanza side has something to say about the constitution of IEBC. They want something about CDF. They want something about establishment of an opposition, you know, and so on and so forth. The other side has issues, high cost of living, audit, and so on and so forth. And if you look at each of those agendas, I can tell you, for instance, that when I look at respect for political parties in line with the constitution, basically that is probably a Jubilee Party agenda, you know. High cost of living is one of those things that is put there so that Kenyans can also feel like they are going to be in the talks, okay? But in actual fact, believe me, I hold the view, like many other people do, that a question with respect to cost of living is a more complicated policy issue which cannot be dealt with, for instance, in the talks that we're just going to have. Okay. Because amongst other things, it's also driven by forces of demand and supply. Right. But eventually, since it's political talk, we cannot run away from this idea that if you want to participate in what is just happening properly, you need to know what the principals want, okay? Because if you don't, you are going to be extremely shocked at what happens eventually. Okay. You will see everybody digging in, then the talks will continually go. By the way, these talks, the way they do, is every day somebody reports to the principal and they say, we have made this progress, this is where we are stuck, what can we do about it? Eventually, the result that will come out of those talks probably has already been extremely highly defined in the principal's mind. Okay. And so, let us not get ourselves into some of these things too quickly. Let's give these people time to get into the talks. We will say whatever we want to say, but we know that eventually it's going to be a political deal.
All right. Arnold Maliba, your thoughts on what Karuti Kanyinga says? Let me just flip back to that. He says, ultimately, at the heart of this, it is about power sharing. You can call it whatever you want. It is about power sharing.
I think Mwalimu is actually very right when he speaks about...
you keep calling him Mwalimu.
No, I'm talking about he is Mwalimu, and of course...
You are Mwalimu?
I used to teach in university and retired.
Oh, okay. All right. You know, he's been saying Mwalimu Mamboleo. Yes. Okay, yes.
So
proceed,
both Mwalimu Kanyingi and Mwalimu Mamboleo here speak profoundly about this. But I'd like just to point out a few things. Before I get even to responding to that, that first and foremost, I get a sense from Mwalimu and Wakili here that the talks will continue nonetheless. And that they somehow, the end is already known. You know, let's get it here very clearly. First of all, if it is true that the end is already determined, then why are we buying this particular time, knowing too well that it's too costly and it tears into the social fabric? And it could actually, the outcome of actually a lengthened discussion, all of us knows how it goes.
Because they have to manage their political basis, right?
Forget that. I'm actually surprised that an experienced negotiator and a person who's worked in the back end, I don't know about Wakili here, but I know about Mwalimu Mamboleo here. He knows how these things work, the finer details of how these things go about. That he would actually go around and make political statements and oxymorons. About, he's speaking about hardliners and other people. If the principles determine, there is nothing about hardliners. There's generally a lie in this country where people talk about so-and-so is good, it's only the people who surround him. That is a lie. For those of us who have actually worked in political circles, you know that is a lie. That what you see the external circle do is actually incidental to what the leader wants done. So if truly the two quote-unquote principles want a dialogue, or if it's a mediation, that is something we cannot run away from. We must define what we are having. Because 8 million Kenyans of voting age did not vote. That is a third of the people who cast their votes. We cannot have a national dialogue that is made of two sides, principally a Raila side and a William Ruto side. There are other people who also represent interests, including those who didn't vote. He spoke about the issue of two sides thinking that they won. There is no thinking. We are a country that gave ourselves a law at the constitutional level, and he's taught law for a very long time. So he knows that we have got a constitution, and that constitution is not a suggestion. So we have got a constitution. Then we have got statutory law that's passed by parliament and everything else around that. So people went to elections. They elected a leader according to the threshold established by law. And out of that, the people who did not feel, who feel they didn't get justice went to the Supreme Court of all places.
I think
for an audit.
He said he acknowledged that.
No,
but he says all that well and good, but
I'm using the term. I'm using the term think. And him being a lawyer, he knows the importance of simple words and why we define words. When you say that both sides think they won, Kenya Kwanza does not think.
Because my
Kenya
friend,
Kwanza was declared by IBC, which is a constitutional
Maliba, because the
agency.
question is this.
Number two,
if that was the case, then why are we having talks in the first place?
We are having talks because of the human nature and the bad manners of our politics. But Kenya Kwanza does not think they won. They were declared by IBC, and all of us were here. Then, Azimio went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then declared that Kenya Kwanza had won. So they do not think, they know they won.
But then again, Olive, I think one thing that, and I agree with Maliba, the problem that we are in is that we have allowed ourselves in this politics for the tail to be to be wagging the dog all the times.
Who is the tail in this case?
Now, when in this analogy, the tail here is the person who keeps on, who is holding the short end of the stick, and demanding the entire stick in the circumstances. In fact, let me tell you the truth. If at all we believe in the rule of law, then we must believe in the Constitution. If we must believe in the Constitution, this Constitution tells us the manner in which a government needs to be formed. Now, can we then agree that it's true that the opposition today is trying to assail the Constitution?
No.
So let me just finish. Let me finish what I actually was trying to execute. Number one, there is also a lie on this table that there is a big brother somewhere who is then directing us on what to do. That they have told Kenya expressly, Wakili has said that there should not be violence, and that now we are towing that particular line.
Yes.
That kind of thinking is not just juvenile. It's actually far off removed from fact. Because was there violence? Yes, there was. Have we had instances where we've actually gone over the board? A lot of times. Again, I will talk about experience. For the people who've worked at the end of what makes government work, we in public policy call ourselves government technicians. We who try to fix government work know there is a lot of work that is put into ensuring that Enterprise Kenya functions, even if you don't like it the way it is. There is so much work that goes into it. And the lie that there is a big brother somewhere who is herding us around is a lie that has been pushed by politicians to gain mileage over others and, of course, show us that they're in control.
Okay.
And
the other lie, the other lie here is that, the talks have already been had and they are going to be had. If these talks, if William Ruto and Raila had already decided and they saw the importance of having these talks, we will not be here largely. What we will be having is having the other part that feels unrepresented. Because Kenya has got over 90 political parties. So when you're going to have about 6 or 7 leading that particular talk, it's a lie. So can I speak to what Mwalimu Kanyingi said?
Next round, because I want to give you said what Ishmael said was juvenile. So I want to give him a right of reply. I know you also had something to say, but before then, Javas will have a go. We take a break. I have to take a break. Then we come back with Ishmael's response.
Nilinunua shamba na nilipanda mimea ya kuuza marikiti, lakini ukame ukanirudisha magotini.
To get Mariana, dial *811*850#.
Skiza, non-nation.
We broke up. Is there a second chance? I have totally lost confidence in Alonso, and that is just irreparable.
Hello?
It's me. I need you to come here.
What for?
Things are getting out of hand. They even asked for new blood tests.
Don't call me Rodrigo. You're Rodrigo. I am Diego. No. I am Diego. You can't negotiate on this. Rodrigo wants to kill me.
Goodness. Oh, goodness.
Where is he?
I keep telling you this was getting dangerous.
Head over heels. Reach your audience instantly and make a lasting impression with Nation Sema. Affordable SMS at 0.3. Kenya shillings. Own sender ID for 10,000 Kenya shillings plus 10,000 free SMS. To sign up, please call 0790 111 111 or email us on nationsema@ke.nationmedia.com.
Centum Real Estate offers you an opportunity to own a home at the Two Rivers Development, Mzizi Court Residence. Talk to us today on 0703 262626 or text 2 Rivers to 22365.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. Before we took the break, I did promise Ishmael Nyaribo right of reply to Anwar Maliba's statement that the belief that the international community is leading us around by the nose, to quote one James Mamboleo just now, is juvenile.
Oliver, I honestly don't want to reply to that because you see, Mariba comes out as quite understanding, but his conclusions do not match the thesis. So I don't want to go into whether we are friends with the United States, whether we cooperate with Japan, we cooperate with the UK. I don't want to go into those details because we cannot have a conclusion. But I just wanted to pick, in fact, before James picked from where Mr. Javas left it, I simply wanted to pose a question. Does the government give the youth a chance? And it's exactly what Kanyinga is actually talking about. He is alluding to the fact that elites are not involved. He even went ahead and suggested that the Kenya Policy, Research Institute.
This intelligentsia.
Yeah. So who is the problem here? Does the government give its youth a chance? I am very sure if you go to Kipra, there are several reports about whatever you want to know. Does the government pay attention to that? And I'm not talking about only William Ruto's government. I'm just talking about the government. From history, does the government go into honoring the elite's views? And that's why you see the good political scientists there arguing that much as there are political discussions, the issue is how people are left out from the national cake. Now, today we are talking about inclusivity. Hardliners are already interpreting that to mean, this guy wants nusu mkate, this guy is thinking about his own whatever interests. In reality, if you look at very advanced countries, a youth, just a small boy, quote unquote, will make a watch, it will be commissioned by the relevant body, and it will be sent to Africa, and we will buy it. Here, when a good youth makes a motorbike in the rural village, we will simply demean them and probably never even pay attention to it. So I think that the youth in this country, the elites in this country, actually do a good job. We are doing a very wonderful job here, trying to point out that hardliners should, be tolerant and accommodate each other, and the other side, of course, feeling that, no, these are not hardliners. This is still a participation in this country. Will the government listen? That is a big, big question. So in terms of what Raila wants in the discussions and what Ruto wants in the discussions, it is not true that everybody else in the world is not concerned or is silent about it. Our friends, our partners are extremely concerned. And my brother says he's done research for the World Bank, and he knows how money comes into this country. He knows where we borrow from. And you cannot be borrowing from a particular source and still say we are so independent of that source. So in my view, it is the government that should listen. Everyone should be included, and we should avoid this gaslighting mentality where when you have a microphone, the first thing you want to say is so-and-so is a liar. So-and-so wants a nusu mukate. So-and-so is just a maandamano and throwing stones. These kind of things are the ones that are actually separating Kenyans than bringing them together. So this is really what should be stopped.
Okay. Javas, the usage of the term national dialogue in the statements that have been issued by both camps, is this just a case where they've just changed players? They've just changed the roster of now who is engaged in these talks, because when you say national dialogue, very many stakeholders came out during the protests. We had the church, we had civil society, even during the debate on the finance bill, now an act. Very many players outside these two wanted to be involved in, let's sit down, let's talk, let's resolve what is at the root and the core of these issues. But now it has been, the talks are now just between two political players. And somebody here said, we have how many political parties?
About 90.
90. The rest are excluded. Is this really about inclusion?
You see, Olive, Professor Karuti Kanyinga and I are contemporaneous. And being, public intellectuals, and of course, a man that is also great in writing and thought, I agree with him on critical sentiments there that much of the discourse today is being driven by the politicians, and the politicians are actually fronting political interests. And the outcome of whatever discussion is going to take place will be to suit the narrow political interests and not the broader national interests. And that's why I would agree with Thomas Paine in his treatise, Common Sense, that if a people do not embrace the same for purposes of driving their collective interests, they will be led by the interests, not so common, of the narrow political elites. And that's the sad situation we find ourselves in. Olive, let us face it. We cannot talk about national dialogue because dialogue, even the name dialogue itself, connotes two parties, unless we want to talk about national conversation or convention. The moment we are talking about bipartisan, we're also, of course, being constricted to the particularities of the interests of two sides. And these two sides, of course, we know right now is presently the opposition and the government. Let us be true to the realities that, when you look at Article 43 of the Constitution, for instance, the collective of all those needs that are for the greater good of the people. And then you realize the circumstances we are facing today. Next week, we are having even the devolution conference happening in Eldoret. I've not had it being prioritized, for example, the issue of climate change and its ravages to be a critical issue for discussion or negotiation in the agenda items. That's very critical. Or food security. Now, the issue of IBC, for example, is very important. Are we talking about issues that are urgent and important, or issues that are important but not urgent? If it's a question of arriving at the agenda items, yes, of course, we know we have heard about the private talks. Let us agree, as it's been said here by my relative Maliba, it will take, of course, the driving interest of President William Ruto. The honors of leading this country are on him, and also being, all of us, the respecters of not just the Constitution, but also of our national interests. When I hear, for example, and it was in one of the dailies, Kalonzo Musyoka saying that we will recognize William Ruto as president if the servers are opened. I don't know where and whether he was actually in the country during the elections, and whether when IBC was streaming the results, the presidential results from across the country. Now, it will not take the recognition of Kalonzo Musyoka of William Ruto to be president for William Ruto to be president. He is.
Okay.
It will not take even Raila Odinga's recognition of William Ruto as president to be president. He is, he took the oath of office.
Okay.
And that is, in fact, such kind of sentiments are the ones that are going to lead the so-called bipartisan talks or dialogue into the headwinds. We need to be respectful of even the processes and the institutions, as Professor Karuti Kanyinga says, because we have institutions that are not at crisis. I've been one of the policy wonks at the Institute of Policy Analysis and Research in the past times, and I can know and I can tell you the extent to which critical knowledge and information exists in this country, as even Ishmailia says. Kipra, for instance, has got critical information and advisory that even the opposition can learn from on the cost of living and what needs to be done.
All right. Just because I want to raise something as a follow-up to what you've said. But just for the, Rigiji, when we were speaking in Sagana yesterday, he was saying, me, I'm just a village guy. Sometimes when I speak out of town, it is because my learning was limited. So for those of us who, like Rigiji, who may not be too learned, wonk, synonym? When you say a wonk?
A clever guy.
A clever guy.
Clever expert.
Okay, all right. We've sort of touched on the international community bit of things, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But this was the Standard yesterday. They talked about the talks Sarakasi, right?
Yes.
But there's something they raised in their editorial, because you talked about institutions in crisis. There's something they raised in their editorial yesterday, which I'm just looking to find, because it was raised by The Nation, as it turns out, as well. I feel like I've skipped it, have I? Okay, so I have. I do beg your pardon. Here we go. And the question of IBC. This was the editorial cartoon, not a very flattering image. The IBC selection panel here, work in progress. They're sitting at a table here, sitting allowance. The tablecloth reads, they're munching on, this is what, chicken, burger, you know, a leg of ham. I don't know, whatever. A leg of ham, but ham, we're supposed to have sausages. I hope they'll not agree on the talks anytime soon. Me too, I'm loving this job. Then in its editorial, the Daily Nation, and here we go, just make mention, in case I'm accused of not also promoting our publication, this was the editorial, no, I'm kidding. But this was the editorial cartoon on The Nation yesterday, reminded me of Mbuzi na guitar. Anyway, aside from that, here they talk about sitting allowances of, let me see, I think they said 180,000 as per SRC. And they've been 16, here we go, the selection panel has so far held 16 meetings with little headway in the recruitment of new commissioners to restore the full complement to do the job. The members are paid a total of 180,000 shillings for every sitting, in line with the SRC. The committee is also incurring expenses in office, payment of drivers and other support staff, running into millions of shillings every month. Your thoughts on this, but also as you weigh in, you know, given we've had talk of Samia Suluhu attempted, the president said, according to reports, reports, insider sources, that the president did not want a sitting African president meddling in our affairs. So that is when now Olusegun Obasanjo swept in. Given the SACAS, the Standard referenced yesterday, the talk SACAS, you know, is it time in your view for the international community to come back in and now say, call the house to order, so to speak?
There is, I need to start somewhere, and the place I would start for just 1 second is where my friend Arnold left it. Even in the space where he works in public policy, private, let's call it civil society sector, all the money that he spends there comes from the West. No money comes from Kenya, okay? So you cannot tell partners who have the financial backing of almost just about every activity you do, that they have absolutely no role to play in your life. Even I have a role to play in somebody's life financially, and sometimes I have to make very big decisions for them, even if they might not like it. Now, I can tell you for sure, the IMF, World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions, to be precise, has serious influence on a country like Kenya, whether you want to like it or you don't. Now, do they sometimes interfere with political process? They do, not just in Kenya, but in many other places, okay? Sometimes they even effect regime changes, which we don't like, okay? But this is the truth of the matter, that we always go to them with a bowl trying to beg for 1 shilling or the other. We cannot declare independence, autonomy, without being financially independent. Look at the budget, for instance, this year, probably around 3 trillion. How much are we expecting, even with the new Finance Act, how much are we expecting to raise as internal revenue? We cannot match our expenditure with the revenue we raise, however much we might tax ourselves. So we always have to go back to beg from them. There is no way you can be talking big on financial, on autonomy and independence and sovereignty, and you have no money of your own that you have to beg. So I would really beg to differ with my friend Maliba on that one. Western countries have a lot more influence than is desirable, not in just this administration, but even in previous administrations. That is a whole story again that probably we need to come here and canvass on a whole day. But to your current question, all manner of things, including IABC, waiting to be reconstituted. We have, of course, various issues that need to be dealt with as a nation and so on and so forth. My answer is extremely simple. Both sides of this divide, the opposition and the government, and even those people who did not participate or deem it fit to participate in the last or previous elections, need to have a conversation about the country we want. You cannot, for instance, expect foreign direct investment in a country in which people do not know when the next demonstrations that probably will come along with some chaos and so on is going to be. All right? However, you have seen that the opposition has taken their rights to picket and demonstrate extremely seriously, because probably they feel that is the only way they can get attention of this government and whoever else they want to get attention of. But on the other hand, you can also see, in my view, that government is also demonstrating. I do not see, for instance, the reason why government is moving throughout the regions on a daily basis 1 year after they got into office. I thought, in my view, of course, carrying it from the conversation that Javas and other people here have been having, there is a lot of policy work to be done. I expected this government to be a little bit quiet, cabinet secretaries, hold up with the bureaucracy of the civil service somewhere, auditing how we got to where we are, what we need to do to move forward. Of course, looking at existing policies side by side with the, let's say, the Kenya Kwanza manifesto and so on and so forth, speaking very little, not insulting anyone, and so on and so forth. And then after some point, giving some clear policy guidelines on a number of issues that we need to do for the country to move forward. Because for crying out loud, there is no doubt at all that William Samoei Ruto is the President of the Republic of Kenya. That one you cannot change. And it doesn't matter what Raila Odinga or Kalonzo Musyoka says about it. He remains president, and right now he bears the responsibility of moving the country forward. So he should also not allow some of these things to derail him. He should not allow people from outside his government and people from within his government to derail him. In fact, let me tell you, I would tell you, Olive, some of the biggest enemies of William Ruto are from inside Kenya Kwanza itself. Because it is not the case that probably they are so willing to let him do his job as he should. So he should be very careful how he proceeds. And I think each of these sides needs a cohesive, peaceful country for them to go about their activities. So coming to these talks, I think what needs to be done is to allow a process in which Kenyans ventilate, even if it's through those talks, and get some reconciliation of some sorts so that the country can move forward. Because if this tension continues, it doesn't matter how noble William Ruto's intention for the country is. Okay. We will not succeed. Right. It doesn't matter what kind of view that Raila Odinga might have for the country and its future. If there is no country, then there is absolutely nothing to look forward to. Okay. So I think both sides do really need to calm down. We need to get some of these hardliners out of that process. And I think both sides should give very clear instructions. We have agreed, go and talk. Go and talk and stop making a lot of noise out here. Okay. Let us wait for that to happen. Let the country start calming down so that Kenyans can do their job, as Nyaribo said, plant your beans and your maize and you go on with your life. Because as you're going to realize quite soon, these talks, however good they might be, they might really not change your life as a Kenyan.
Okay. There's something you said that reminded me of something that Karuti, and I'm coming to you, Arnold, Karuti Kanyiga said, penned yesterday, and he said, other than the demand to address the cost of living and reconstitution of the Electoral Commission, the grievances are incoherent and scattered all over. But even on the issue of cost of living, the opposition has not tabled alternative policy recommendations to demand that the government implement. It is true that the cost of living is an issue of concern, but an opposition party's major responsibility is to bring out credible proposals that the public would support if they compare with what the government is presenting. He says this has not happened. So I was just saying he concurred with you on that one. Arnold, what role, I'm confused about the role the international community is playing in this process. Was it just to bring the two parties together and then leave them to steer the process? Because when I look at people daily And they mention here that that the two headlines, the two take headline stance ahead of Obasanjo talks. But then when you look at a Kenya Kwanza statement that was released by Kimani Ichung'wah, he said that honoring the request by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo not to be mentioned in any public statement, we regret the lack of decency by Azimio in not respecting this request. So, you know, are they in the background somewhere? What do you make of this conflicting?
I think we really need to be very clear when it comes to defining the role of external forces, whether they are the West, whether they are our neighbors, or whoever they are. I still hold it that we are not, the West is not doing us any favor. They are not controlling us around. And I am actually a little bit trembling when a person of Mwalimu Mamboleo's stature talks about those people helping us, and then, of course, he actually used the term initially, pulling us by the nose. They are not. If the West had to have its way, then Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto would never have been president in the first place. We as a nation, that's the truth, we as a nation have learned how to chart our own way forward. That many times we even get to the, literally on the edge, and we find our way back. All the others, we don't live, of course, in a vacuum, but we have learned to coexist with the others because we are part and parcel of the League of Nations. So when you talk about IMF and the World Bank and what they do for us, it's not for free. They're in business with us. As in, it's debt. Actually, Kenya's biggest debt is actually owed to the Bretton Woods institutions. And you don't put that to look like they are doing us a favor. For whatever the West does, including bringing money down here, they are doing, the money they bring down here, a lot of it was actually looted. You know, the West is actually built on our resources as Africans, on our labor during slavery, and exploiting the economy of those days. So going out there and celebrating them and raising them up as a scepter where we actually need to go and worship is actually not a very honest thing for a country that is looking forward to its sixth revolution, or rather its sixth level of moving forward. But be that as it is, there's also no president, there's also no problem for the president to go around. I heard again Wakili Mamboleo speak about the president going out there, and he calls that demonstrating. The government is not demonstrating. Number one, public participation is a tenet in our constitution. When the president reaches out to his own people, what is the problem with the president reaching out? That is public participation. Number two, he's gone out to assure the nation that we actually are in control as a government. Everything is moving well. He spoke about the economy having stabilized. Exactly after a week or so, after we actually had gone through what would look like a little bit of turmoil, political turmoil. So it is his role as the leader of a nation to go out there, speak confidence to the people, and get moving on. So we cannot be, and I keep on saying this, one side of the political divide should not think that they have got a monopoly on being cheeky, on doing these things, on going on top of cars. As in, no one has got that monopoly. And when you talk about sound policies, I think Karuti Kanyinga speaks about credible. And that is why we are skirting around this discussion because we do not want to deal with the issues. So long as the agenda that is being pushed from the opposition is what it is, we are not going to have a national dialogue or multipartism dialogue or whatever. Because number one, if the cost of living is up here, if this government agrees to have the cost of living as an issue to be discussed extra-governmentally outside of what is established by government, they will actually be saying that they are unable to govern this country. Because how do you bring the cost of living down? It's done at 4 levels. Number one, it's done on farms by the people who till their land, those who take care of their animals. Farmers have been doing that. And number two, at policy level, government has actually done a little bit of policy interventions here and there. And number three, we as Kenyans have got a role to play in that by working every day. All of us wake up every morning to work around that. And then number four, there are externalities that we cannot really change so much about that. If the government accepts to have these on the table, then it's not a government. Okay. Two, when you are auditing these elections, after, as in, if we avoid these issues, Olive, we will not have a discussion. Okay. So there are only two things, and I agree with Kanyingi, that need to be prioritized. There are people in this country who do not have representation in parliament. Elections cannot be done because we do not have IBC. That is a serious issue. Those people, we are denying them a right of representation. Okay. We need IBC in place. The cost of living, of course, is a priority, but we cannot have a mediation on the cost of living. How do we have that particular dialogue?
Arnold, I'll have to stop you there
Yeah.
so that I can have Ishmael weigh in on something. Wakili, this front page of the Standard, Azimio fury at ICC Khan tour, and if you look at a tweet from Martha Karua, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan, hosting in Kenya this weekend by Mount Kenya University, and its founder, a friend of his former client, William Ruto. At a time, both the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza regime have written to the ICC on the situation in the country, especially the killing spree of unarmed protesters by police is not only suspect, but also a blot on the credibility of the ICC. Quickly, your thoughts.
I mean, the question is, has he come in on his official capacity as the ICC prosecutor, or he has come in as an individual to visit the country?
Does it matter which?
It really matters, because is he representing ICC when he's here? I mean, I'm an advocate.
Either way, we are looking at the time in which he is coming and the message that it sends.
No, I think we need to cut Khan a slack. I mean, we need to be honest about his personality as an individual so that we don't mix politics in his visit. I mean, it would really, I'm sure it injures the opposition a lot, but I'm laying a basis that has he come as an individual or he has come as an ICC prosecutor? So I think the fact that he has a relationship with Mount Kenya, they are honoring him. I mean, why would he be honored by Mount Kenya and not, you know, maybe anywhere else? Why particularly Mount Kenya? I don't want to be in any way derogatory. Yeah. Why Mount Kenya University? Yes. So that is the area I can critique. That's the area I think say no, this is not correct.
All right.
But in terms of him visiting the country and probably going to, he actually did not go to Sagana, I believe. He went to Mount Kenya University, and it's right here in Nairobi or Thika. So in that sense, I think the opposition should not be petty. But in terms of his credibility and integrity as a person now, Hudi, as a former counsel for the president of Kenya, then deputy president, would he be right to be in Nairobi, especially at a time when the opposition is actually saying, hey, we need to have this matter investigated by the same ICC prosecutor? Those are debatable issues. Okay. But we should not, just for fear, heap blame for an individual who is interested in going around the world or going to be honored by some university.
So it doesn't cast aspersions on his independence, is what I'm hearing you say?
I think it's here neither there. I'm not in a position to really think that
he has said so much.
Aspersions.
Javas?
Yes.
Well, I think Honorable Martha Karua, Senior Counsel, has cut a slice of bread of pettiness from the bakery of desperation. And that is why we are seeing so much constipation. And it's improper of a leader of her stature to be whining about everything and even trying to curtail freedom of movement of an individual who is not invited by the state, but by independent individual and a university that has got its own charter. So I think that's improper. On the issue of President William Ruto moving across the country, Kenyans did not elect and vote for William Ruto to go to State House and lock himself up in 4 walls.
Okay.
It is his place to move and lead the country. When you talk about the youth bulge that you've talked about, we must work to avert the situation that's happening in Niger, in Burkina Faso, and in fact the larger part of West Africa. You realize that the issues of youth bulge and the negative energy that comes out of it is what is leading us to the situation in West Africa and in Niger.
All right.
I think it's proper for us to change, or rather, to harness the kinetic energy of the youth into positive energy for the progress and development of our country. 30
seconds on the ICC issue.
First and foremost, I think the question whether Khan is rightfully within his right to come to the country is extremely debatable. As these things unfold, we'll know how his trip here has affected the situation. But of course, you should also bear in mind that his visit here can be looked at in all manner of ways, depending on who is looking at it. Okay. And because he's an independent officer and we have no other ICC prosecutor, he should be extremely careful how this impacts on his job as the ICC prosecutor.
All right. Arnold, lastly.
First of all, if Khan's visit here would be looked through the prism that we're actually seeing today, then first of all, Khan would never have been allowed to be a prosecutor at ICC because he has in the past served as a council on the other side. So coming on this particular side, if we were to look at it from that end, but be that as it may, Khan supports primary schools in this country way before this particular visit. He has a pre-existing relationship with Mount Kenya. We are not talking about the children he's been supporting in Kajiado for all that time. So how we should not split hairs, because ICC is an institution, and the person of Khan cannot determine the policy single-handedly by visiting around here. Be that as it may, if we really wanted to use ICC as a scarecrow to actually make political mileage, I think then the opposition really needs to think. Because from where we sit, Olive, the truth is that there is no crisis in this country that needs mediation or dialogue. Okay. What we have is a withdrawal symptom, because power is like a drug. And what we see from the Azimio side, they still are suffering from the withdrawal, from flying with helicopters, moving around with the BBI thing and everything else that Kina Mambole and others were working around. Right. But we need to tell them what upon to.
Careful.
Many
of them have helicopters. I have been mentioned. I do not know what he's talking about. I do not know. You see, this is the problem now with the people who advise Kenya Kwanza. And I think I am begging that William Samoei Ruto gets people like me to advise him.
With the dual symptoms. Goodbye. Maliba Arnold, public policy analyst. Javas Bigambo, lawyer and governance specialist. James Mamboleo, advocate. Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate and political analyst. Good morning.
A dominant team's pursuit of excellence and success never stops, as Manchester City has proven in recent years. The drive for success has been relentless. Manager Pep Guardiola always demanding more and better. So it is, with a new season about to kick off, that Manchester City resumes its relentless pursuit of excellence and success.
On my dark marks, I've tried everything from A to Z, even vitamin C, but hardly any results. Nivea Lumina 630 works from day one, with visible results in just 2 weeks and 71% dark marks reduction.
Congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you.
Marina, Andri, I'm so happy for you both.
Thank you.
You owe me everything. You aren't in prison because of me.
Yes, Katerina? We have just received today a subpoena from my grandson, Dennis. Guess what? The plaintiff is Yana. Tell me, do you really believe that Dennis owes anything to your crazy daughter? Why do you need a fake passport?
None of your business. Give me back what you've stolen and I'll leave.
Yana, you need to go to the hospital. I've already called the ambulance. You aren't going anywhere this time.
I'll never leave you again.
Matukio makuu ya nchi, sio bungeni, sio wizarani. Kigodani, uongozi na upigia upatu. Kila Jumatatu. Mimi ni Frederick Mwitiriri na hii ni NTV.
On my doc marks, I've tried everything from A to Z, even vitamin C, but hardly any results. Nivea Lumina 630 works from day one, with visible results in just 2 weeks and 71% doc marks reduction in 12. Join the 1 million women already using the #1 Lumina 630 from Nivea.
Gavi anakuhanya. Nilimwona na malaika.
Gavi, unajua na miss ule msimbaya.
Umemjua Makarios for how long?
Mimi hiyo simjui afisa.
Last chance kijana. Who runs this drug business? Na nitamgetaje?
Exponential potential.
Good morning and welcome to The Morning Fix. This is the show where we do ukarabati wa asubuhi. My name is Mariam Bashar.
And the most bankable host, Brian Aseli. Good morning, my neighbors!
Get up and get ready for the most electrifying morning show on your airwaves. Miriam and Aseli on The Morning Fix every weekday from 6 to 10 a.m.
I think Uganda is the only country that they can actually do a musical. All of them. Because they speak funny.
No.
They speak funny.
Umeshapata mkisi wewe.
Otakwesa.
Only on 96.3 Nation FM.
All that talk about the best.
Pesa ambazo zinakuja kwa counties hazitoshi. Mambo ya afya, mambo ya maji, mambo ya library, mambo ya mabarabara ndogo ndogo, mambo ya kilimo. Haya yote ni kazi ya counties. Na pia hata serikali kuu yenyewe imesema kwamba tuko na bottom up economic model. Bottom up ni wapi? Si ni kwa magatuzi.
Kweli? Maandamano haya yamekuwa katika kaunti mbalimbali. Sijui kama hapa Baringo kumekuwa na maandamano ya kupinga hali ya uchumi na gharama ya juu ya maisha.
Hapa ni Kenya Kwanza bwana. Kenya Kwanza haiwezi pinga serikali yake.
Lakini wanasema pia uchumi umepanda kila kaunti. Hapa haujapanda.
Uchumi umepanda kila mahali.
Wanasema kuna harufu hivi ya handshake kati ya Rais William Ruto na Raila Odinga. Handshake ikiwa uko sawa ama pia wewe utaingiwa na tumbo joto gavana?
Tumbo joto na nini? Kwanza mimi niko na kaunti yangu naongoza hapa hivi.
Please welcome our brilliant neurosurgeon, our superstar, Anastasia Streletsky. A round of applause for her, please. Who operated on him?
Does it really matter which doctor arrived?
Yes, it does. Do you realize you're in trouble now?
Mikhailo Vladenko and your other relatives must be happy to know that you're back in the city right now. Vasily is back in the city. Your brother is now the chief of the crime investigation unit. Stop! It means the end for me and my business.
He wouldn't dare.
Hands up! Come on, it's all over. Let's go.
I'm sorry, but it's my wedding. I'm getting married.
We made a mistake.
She will change.
It's more likely she'll change you.
I see you trying to be an OG. Like me, chasing dreams, pulling more schemes for wealth. But the best thing seems nice and bright.
Everything feels alright. I went to school without a fool, trying to pick a fight. I was loped out, crisscross shirts. Now I'm feeling, you know you got to have them. You know you got.
For the best of the 2000s, tune in every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and Sunday from 8 p.m. to 12 midnight.
So live your life.
Rhythm and flow.
Taking you back in the day.
Nation FM.
A dominant team's pursuit of excellence and success never stops, as Manchester City has proven in recent years. The drive for success has been relentless. Manager Pep Guardiola always demanding more and better. So it is, with a new season about to kick off, that Manchester City resumes its relentless pursuit of excellence and success.
We broke up.
Is there a second chance?
I have totally lost confidence in Alonso, and that is just irreparable.
Hello?
It's me. I need you to come here.
What for?
Things are getting out of hand. They even asked for new blood tests.
Don't call me Rodrigo.